Welcome everybody, Steve here. Well today, last week, or one of the past videos, I did a video on laminating a tabletop, and that was actually one of the tops of my table saw, which turned out really good. I'm really happy with that. But I also promised I was going to do a round table for you, a round tabletop. And that is a pretty challenging little project. So if you're thinking about doing that, great timing, because I just built a few of them. I've got a little contract to build a couple, a few round ones of different sizes. I got one at 48, a couple at 42, and some at 30. So I'm going to show you what I did to build these round tables. It's really quite a simple process, but you're going to need some different tools. Anyway, we'll get to that, but the first thing to do is lay out your round table. Okay, so this one here is a 42-inch round table, and you can see I got a little cutout because I was doing another project here. But if I lay this up, you're going to see that I've got it set up into quadrants of 8. So basically I started with a 42-inch square, and do a good job with marking everything out. I went corner to corner, all right, and then on these from the edge, 21 down, and I made a mark at 21, 21, 21, and that splits this into 8 quadrants. Now you're asking yourself, why are we doing that? Okay. What we are going to do is we have to build up the edge of our table so it's 1 1/4 inch thick. So what we're going to do is we're going to glue and nail some strips on here so that we can build the edge up 1 1/4, and then we're actually going to use a router to cut this table up. So I'm going to show you what the underneath of another one I just did looks like. Then you can start to think like I'm thinking. As you can see here, how we got it all set up. Now this little piece here, we've got to build 8 of these because we've got it split into 8 quadrants. And basically, we're going to nail and glue that on there. And then when we router it out, it's going to look like this. Now I've got a design. I hope you're in focus here. Scope this out here. Okay, this one here's got a little bit of a shadow so you can see what's going on. So what we're going to do here is we want about a minimum of 1 inch here and 1 inch here. So then we put that in there. It's got just a little bit there. We're not going to round this over or anything like that. This is perfect for the underneath. That's all we're going to need. But you got to do a little bit of math to figure out what size to build these. We're going to call these fillers. Okay, so we're going to make a mark. You don't really need to draw the circle like I did, but I did it just so you can kind of see where the edge of the table is going to be. Okay? Is that looking good? Yeah, you guys can see that. Alright, so I made a mark. The edge of the table's here. Made a mark at 1 inch and 1 inch. Now we have 8 quadrants. So 360 divided by 8 is 45 degrees. So that means that each side of our little piece of wood that we have here, our fillers, has to be 22.5 degrees. Okay? This is the only tough part. After that, it's going to go real easy, huh? I promise. So if we were to draw a mark between these two lines here, we know right off the bat that minimum we're going to need is 2 5/8 thick in order for our router to make this curve here. So that's why I've got these at 3 inches. You can go a little bit less, but that gives me a nice working number right there. And to determine our total length here, well, the obvious is to measure from this point to this point. But you got to know how the minimum length you're going to need for total length. Just move this line down to 3 inches. This line here, you'd have to put a sacrificial piece there. Bring that down to 3 inches. So let's just do that. Oh, I got my line exact. Measure in between. And you can see that the length is going to be 17.5 approximately. So I made my pieces about 19, my blanks. Okay. Then you cut one edge at 22.5. Measure over this distance here, which happens to be about 15.25. From there to there. And you know what? You're going to play with it a little bit. It might be a little less, depending on how far up you want to go or how far down you want to go. So you will make that determination, but I'm going to stick at about 1 inch. So it worked out to be about 15 3/16, I think. Okay, so now we've got that determined. We can go ahead and cut these. Okay, I hope I'm not confusing you, because I know for me, since I started explaining to you, it's become a lot more clear to me. So that's only good news. One of the things you're going to need is you're going to need a plunge router to do this. And this is my circle cutting jig. I've had this for years. All it is just a piece of thin plexiglass and some holes. Basically all you do is, you bring your router bit out, measure over half of what your distance is, and drill a hole. Now I've got some holes in this where I put a nail in here, and I've got a nail, I'll take this off of course. Put a nail in here, and then I've got some spots where I just put my pencil in, like that, and that's how I drew this circle. And it's just basic, simple. But from that point on, we're not there yet. We gotta work our way to using this. First thing we gotta do is put these on. Okay, we're gonna glue, but we know that we got 1 inch here, 1 inch here, and this is gonna be, it's gonna curve something similar to that. So we don't want to we are actually going to be putting a groove in this, and we don't want to be putting nails everywhere, so our router bit's going to be wheeling into the nails. So we're just going to keep the nails fairly tight so that our router bit's not going to hit them. And now it's just a matter of just setting everything up, gluing them, nailing them down. And then we can go to the next step. I know it's complicated, but actually when you get going on it, it's actually kind of fun. You're going to enjoy it. Just using some 1-inch brads. Alright, working our last piece here. I just put a little bit of glue on the end so that everything's kind of all tied together. So what I do is we're actually going to drill straight through here with a 3/16 drill bit, and I'm actually going to bolt the circle cutting jig onto the table. Now this next part, you're going to have to kind of get in the frame of mind where I'm at and how I do things. So if we look at this point here, which is 21 inches from the edge, goes to the center, and on this edge 21 goes to the center. Now if you have your router set up such that it's cutting exactly 21 inches from center, there is a chance that you might skip the edge. Does that make any sense? Where you might just barely touch it, or you might just be slightly off on your edge. So what I do is from that point and from this point, I will move the nail that way and that way, and that's where I'll put the nail, just even 1/16 of an inch. That way I am for sure going to hit that edge with my router. Like, that was a lot. I hope you got that. Hope that made sense. All right, let's drill that hole. Just going to show you my setup here. Okay, we already know that's a plunge cutting router, and I've got a 1/2 inch straight cutting bit in here. I want something a little bit substantial, that way it's not going to vibrate as much. So that's why I went with the 1/2 inch. You know, we're doing a lot of serious cutting here, so you know, you want something fairly substantial. Now you might think, why would you bolt this down? Well, you could put a nail in there, but I am not going to take any chances whatsoever. I don't want to build these tabletops twice. And I'm actually going to use a locking nut on the other side. We're not going to make it tight because we still want it to spin nice. But I am not going to take any chances here. Thus, the bolt. Oh, you definitely need a mask and some earmuffs for this. Now I got a fairly substantial router here. So, and if you haven't already guessed, we got 5/8 particle board here. So I'm going to do 2 passes. So we should be able to do 5/8 at a time. If you've got a smaller router, you might want to do it 3 passes, and that's up to you. Whatever you feel comfortable with. Go slow, take your time, let the router bit do the work. Alright, just a router tip for you. Now, of course my circle cutting jig is a little flexible, so that means that the router can flex like this. And now that I don't have any support here, you gotta make sure that your router is flat up against the top here and not flexing back like that, or you're gonna put a groove in the side. So be conscious of that. Okay, we can plunge down a little further, continue our cut. And there you have it. Well, that's about as good of a circle as I can cut. And you know, there's other ways of doing it. Of course, you know, if you had a bandsaw, a big enough bandsaw, and a jig, you can roll that in, give it a spin, cut it that way as well. But for me, I like this method here the best. All right, a couple more things to do before we're all finished here. Now, I've done a couple of these, so I'm getting a little bit better at these, but every once in a while, like, you know how I was saying that it flexes a little bit here and there, and every once in a while, got a little bit of a groove, but after inspection, this one is in pretty good shape. Don't have to worry too much about having to repair it. Oh, look at that. Little one right there. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to fix that up. So you probably don't have to fill this little hole up here, but just in case you did a little bit of blowout, you know, when you're doing a drill, that's fine. We're gonna fill that up anyway. And we got this one little spot right here. And you probably already guessed how I'm gonna fill that up. That's right, auto body filler. My favorite when it comes to quick and easy, you know, it dries up in 15 minutes and no messing around. If we're using wood patch, it can be a couple hours to overnight before it dries enough that we could sand that up. So let's get mixing some auto body filler here. Now this just happens to be a 2-part putty, but any auto body filler works fine. Now I will try and sand this. Well, I won't. Now I'm going to sand this before it gets really, really hard. If that makes any sense. So if we let this dry really hard and complete, that means that this is going to be harder than the wood. That means that you're going to have to sand really hard on here, and there's a chance you're going to take too much wood off. So if you leave this about 15 minutes or so, it'll be to the point where it'll be just soft enough that it'll be softer than the wood, and then that way you won't damage the wood. Yeah, if you catch this stuff just right, it doesn't take anything to sand it down. Really, really quite quick. Now, we're going to sand this, but we're also going to go all the way around, and if you know me, it's 40 grit. No screwing around, it takes too much time. But if you run your hand along here, it's a little rough. And when we put our laminate down, we still have to run the router around to cut the laminate. And if this edge is rough and it has a little bit of chatter, you're going to get a rough edge on your laminate. So we want to make sure that we go around and give this a light sand, and just to ensure that we're going to get a quality product. And use a block, you're going to get a lot straighter. As you saw, I sprayed the glue on. Now, one of the things that I really don't enjoy is rolling glue. You know, every time you've got a tabletop, you've got to use that roller and then you've got to throw it away. And you know, if you get a gob or something on the edge, it's just a lot easier if you can use a sprayer you get a lot more even. Now in order to do that, I had to thin this. This is actually a page, this is their heavy duty contact. It's a solvent base. And so make sure, you know, I got the door open, window open, and you gotta have a little bit of ventilation. But I thinned it down about 15–20%, and I bought myself a cheap old gun with a fairly large tip. This one's got a 2.3 tip on it. And it works great. I just was overwhelmed about how easy it was to spray this on. Now you get her on there, and then you can, you know, if you're gonna have a couple dry spots, you just fill it in. And then I always make sure that my edges are well done, because that's where you're gonna get some lifting if you're gonna get anything. All right, we're gonna let this set up. We'll put, I use old broom handles, and we'll lay the top on, and then slowly take the broom handles out, lay her down. Our glue is set up now. You gotta make sure that your glue does set. If it's still a little tacky, give it a little bit more time. Now, this is solvent base. The water-based stuff works pretty good too, but this solvent base is a little quicker to use. It dries quicker. So, you know, if you're doing, I'm doing a few of them, and I think you get a little bit better bond with this type of glue rather than the water base. The water bases are quite a bit thinner, and actually will probably work better in the gun than what this one will. Now when I cut my arborite, or my laminate, I make sure that I've got about a ½ inch overhang everywhere. That way I know that I'm not going to mess it up. Because you got one shot at this, and that's it. One shot. Alright, this is all set up nice. I built a few of them, so this one's been sitting a bit, which you should let it set a little bit so that your router bit won't lift on your laminate. So she's good and dry, ready to go. Now I just got my little laminate cutter here with a laminate bit. Like this one doesn't have a ball bearing, but if you have a little flush trim bit with the ball bearing, that works just fine and dandy. The big thing is just allow it to cut about 1/8 of an inch. If you go any farther than that and you tip your router, then you can actually dig into the side of your table. So just expose a little bit of the cutting blade, and that'll help you out quite a bit. All right. It's time to cut the slot in the side here to receive our T-molding. Now I'm just going to use a slot cutting bit here. This one happens to be 332. And you know, this is going to take all your router skills. You know, you have to make sure that router is nice and flat on the top of your table at all times. If you move it a little tiny bit, that slot's going to get big, or you can do some real serious damage. So take your time. What I like to do, I don't want this little bit to be, it cuts a ½ an inch inside. I don't want to do it all at the same time. I'm just going to go around lightly, do a little light pass, and then I'm going to come back and finish it all off. So it's not too bad, but if you're a little bit worried about it, practice on something first. That way you don't ruin your tops. Come a long way here. We don't want to wreck nothing now. Time for the T-mold. And that's exactly, it looks exactly like a T, well, a big T. It's a vinyl. I really like it. I used it on my table saw top, and what I like about it is if we were to put laminate on the side here, and you're moving these tables around, you bump them into something, you can get a chip quite easily. But if you're using the vinyl, you got a bumper, and then you won't have to worry about getting a chip. Now, I just tap it in. I just use my body hammer. You can use a rubber mallet if you want, but you just don't want to. You don't want to be just hammering on this stuff to get it in. It needs to go in nicely, and basically all I do is tap it. I don't want to deform this. I don't want to mar up the edge or anything like that. So you got to take your time. And sometimes, you know, this stuff here is not, comes in a big roll. Sometimes this T is bent over a little bit, so there's struggles, and then every once in a while it just goes like magic. So we'll get started. A couple of the tools I'm going to use a real sharp utility knife. I got some snips here. To do my cutting, I actually use a PEX cutter and a screwdriver, and you'll see when we're going to be using that. Now, I guess, before we get going, how long do I cut it? Well, we have a circle, so it's pi times diameter. The diameter of this is 42 times 3.14, gives us roughly about 132 inches. I better make sure of that, eh? Well, I know that, yeah, it's got to be close. Now I gotta go get my calculator. I'll be right back. $132, 138 or 131.88. But give yourself an extra inch. Last thing you need to be is short. That'd be catastrophic. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the right number. This one here is 42 wide. I've done one that was 48, and then a couple that are 30. So each one's going to be different. All right, let's get started. So here's giving me trouble already. hit a snag. Sometimes that T wants to bend over a little bit. I think the key to this stuff here is making sure that your groove is in the right spot. So you really got to take your time setting that up. All right, this is key to the whole operation right here. So, call that in just a bit more. Okay, so I want this to overlap about, 3/4 of an inch or so. It's about as straight as I can cut it. All right. So then, you basically just run your knife right along this edge. I'm just going to take this corner off of this T here, just a tiny bit. Just so we don't get any binding somewhere. So just ride your blade right along that edge and just make a nice light cut. Do it again. A little deeper this time. Okay, now we can all along. Okay, now we just have to dig this out. Hopefully I wasn't in your way there. Get that out of the groove. Oh man, she's really in there. Okay, so now I got it exposed. I take my little snips here and I snip the back side. Make sure we're good. Looks good. This one can just pop right in there. Actually, because we were riding on top here, this is actually a little bit longer, so we're a little bit under compression, and that's kind of what you want, just slightly. If you're farther out, you're going to be way too much and then you get a big buckle right here. But to leave a little bit of tension in there so that if it does shrink, then you won't get a gap there. Wow. That one turned out really good for the camera. Perfect. Wow, they're looking awesome. Now, just a couple more things to bring them over the top. We're just going to take a fine file, nothing coarse, and you'll feel a little sharp edge right on the very top. If, like my T-molding comes just about to the top here, so I can feel just the sharp edge of the laminate. So I'm just going to take a file, about a 45-degree angle or so. Doesn't take much. Alright, one more thing we have to address. Now, our substrate was 5/8, so we got 1 1/4, but we also have the thickness of our laminate. So there's a little ridge right there. Now, when it comes to, is that going to work for me in my shop? I'm good with that. But I don't want to leave that lip on there when you've got some clients that are, you know, they're going to want it a little nicer. So, quick solution for that. We're just going to sand this edge down. Okay, I got my sander set up here with a piece of 80 grit. I'm going to go on about a, I don't know, what is that, about 10-degree angle. And you can see when it just starts to hit the bottom of the T-mold. And that's all there is to it. Well, there's quite a bit to it. You know, you need a couple more specific tools, you know, that you might not have. But in the scope of things, you know, when you do one little step at a time, you know, you don't have to fire that many brain cells to get this to work for you. You just have to fire them in the right order. That's it. So, this was fun. You know, you don't do this every day, so whenever you get a challenging project like this, I really quite enjoy that part of it. So anyway, till we build something unusual, which probably won't be very long from now, thanks for watching, and see you later.